Alrighty, so I'll let you guys know again. Dr. Corey Gilbert is actually recording this, so he's gonna make sure this is available to you guys for the future. So yeah, so you're also on recording, so unless you want evidence that you say things like that. Yeah. So anyhow, Becky, I'm gonna let you introduce. It's been a long day.
Don't say anything dumb.
Yeah, don't say anything dumb. Introduce Dr. Corey here. So thank you.
So Dr. Corey Gilbert is a professor at Corbin University, and I had the chance of never taking his class, which is unfortunate. Really backwards. But he has shared in multiple events on campus, and so I've had the opportunity to hear from him. So when Craig brought up what we wanted to have a keynote about, I was like, oh my gosh, is Dr. Gilbert available? And he said, yeah, I'd love to serve. So I'm really excited for you guys to get to learn from him and what he's going to share with us today. So I'm going to pray for you, and then we're going to get into this. So Jesus, I just thank you so much for the knowledge and the brain that you have given Dr. Gilbert, and I pray that as he shares with us today that we would just be willing to hear what it is, so that we can minister to these kids better. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. Looking forward to the next 5 or 6 hours. Isn't that what we have, right? That would just scratch the surface, actually. So, name is Dr. Gilbert, Corey Gilbert, professor at Corbin, and I've been in private practice. Actually, this summer will be 20 years, which is crazy to think about. In probably 6 states. I feel like we're settling down now. 7 years here in Oregon. Before this, we were in Georgia. It's my wife, Kelly. So glad to have her with me. Yay! We have 3 kids. This is our church picture. It's about the best we could get a few years ago. Decided to go with the one that's actually real, not the fake ones. We have 3 experiments, is what I call them. And they're literally very different experiments. You try one thing with one and that doesn't work with the next. And that's what you see in ministry as well, and serving the kids you have. So today what I want to do, I could talk for hours up here. I love my subject. I love what I working with people, hurting people. In private practice, I would ironically say some of my favorite clients are gender identity, homosexuality, affairs, the junk. Because God's a God that's a redeemer. And so if we actually believe that, and it helps us fight through the muck to get to the things that we can't do, as we see God do something beautiful. So, and I feel like that's probably where every one of you are at in the sense of what you want to do. So today, instead of walking through a ton of content, which, again, I've got different things I'm going to pull up as we kind of have stuff to talk about. I actually want to, throughout the next little bit, hear from you. What are some situations you're in? And so be thinking about this for a minute. What are some situations you're in that you would actually want to ask questions about? How can I help you with actual people you're talking with, working with? Answer questions. Got a call a few weeks ago. A good friend of mine, 5-year-old son, is demanding that he's a girl. What do you do? And it's interesting because I was like, I know that guy from 10 years ago. I'm like, if we had been dealing with this 10 years ago, we wouldn't be asking the questions we're asking today. And so the big question there is, what do we do? And helping them wrestle as parents and ask questions. And others that are dealing with school district issues, where the school steps in, and I would say oversteps their bounds as well, but asserts a certain story on a child just because they happen to be a little different. But also parents that are doing the same thing. Because we're all trying to figure out how to help our kids succeed. Do we actually do it well? Well, that's part of why I even call my own 3 experiments. Is it's hard. They're different. And the stuff they're wrestling with and struggling with is unique to them in a sense. But the theology part's probably where I guess my heart is also, it grieves. So this is my new book. I can't say that. If you want a copy of this, if you fill out the little piece of paper in the middle there, afterwards, we'll give you a free copy of this. This is my labor of love this past year. Actually, this finished it last year, finally published in April. I can't say that, going beyond the talk, equipping your children to make choices about sexuality and gender from a biblical sexual ethic. This is meant for leaders and parents to walk through hard questions, and it even has a workbook. So if you want that, we actually have them as well. But the workbook is meant to help you, what do I believe as a leader and as a parent, so that when I'm asking questions and engaging in conversations, I can actually lead well, help well. Because what I'm finding is so many parents are absolutely at a loss as to how to handle these conversations. And where did we lose track? The church has addressed this forever, but not always from a very gentle position. And we need to be careful with that. How can we, because again, some of you are, and hopefully we'll share these in a minute, some of you are in conversations with students that they absolutely believe what they believe. And how do you lead them well? How do you meet them where they're at? That's going to be some of the hardest things for us to do. So if you're interested in getting one of these, just fill that out afterwards for my wife, because she can give you one of those. Because I want to get them into your hands. If you want more, there's more that we can get you as well. Because I really, again, I want you to be wrestling with this for yourself. But also sometimes some of you actually are new parents too, and that's awesome as well. But one of my burdens right now once I published this was most parents don't see the need for it till their kids are 12 or 13. And it's called The Talk. And I was like, no, it's actually too late. It's more actually like this. This is what it ends up becoming. I think it's time we had to talk about sex, and the kids answer, what would you like to know? That's more like, that's too true. When the parents still haven't figured out texting and the kids are sexting, it's like, whew, this is heavy. So we have to meet them earlier. And one of the burdens I have with that is, how do I get this into young parents' hands? And so I speak at homeschool conferences and other places where I'm talking to moms and dads, that it's like, this conversation starts at 2. So then we'll actually talk about age-appropriate conversations. Whatever you have in your mind is when you think you should talk about some of these things, back it up about 5 or 6 years, ironically. Because we live in a different world where others are teaching our kids. So who's the default going to be? What I have found is most often our kids end up believing whatever they heard first. Isn't that weird? Silence at home, silence even at church, and then they're hearing a different story being played out. And the story being played out in our culture is, you either love me or you hate me. There is no in between. Because love means you endorse everything I say and do, and you don't ever challenge me. Well, there's a book that was written in 1989 called After the Ball. And it was how America is going to conquer its hatred of gays in the 90s. And it's a history book today. It literally mapped out how the culture will change over the next 10, 20 years. And it's exactly what's happened. And what's sad is the church has been so far behind it and handled things so ill, so unprepared. So you guys are on the front lines. You're in the lives of kids who are hearing stories and hearing things being imposed on them as to what their story should be. How can you speak into their life? And I think that's one of the most critical places to start. So let me actually open it right now. What is a place you're at, a story you have of someone you've worked with or talked with?
Here's a question from a dad here in the audience. I have a 16-year-old daughter. She has always had, since the 6th grade, either gay friends or once changing their gender or that are gender neutral. I have taken them out on the boat and to camp, but I would never have the talk with them. I didn't want to alienate them. My daughter, her response to me was to call them what they wanted to be called. And that's all she'd say. Don't make them feel weird. So they spend the night at my house, but I never engage them on their life. I'm not sure if that's the right question to ask.
Well, so an important word that I use a lot in marriages, working with couples, is this word permission. There's certain levels that we have when it comes to engaging in conversations. And so what it sounds like to me is you actually felt like you really didn't have permission to open those doors. And he didn't ask for it, so that's another piece of it. But think about that as permission, as in some of you are in a casual conversation and there's a low level of trust. It's going to be a different conversation than there's a longer relationship and a higher level of trust. And there's more permission to go into some deeper dives of identity and struggle, and that's an important distinction, if you will. Otherwise, what I actually find is a lot of times as a Christian, we almost feel we're beating ourselves up. Why didn't I talk to them about it? Why didn't I set them straight? Things like that. And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. You need to wait for that prompting even of the Holy Spirit to when can I open that door, take that next even baby step into their life and their story. As in what you're doing when you're out on the boat and doing things is you're building relationships. Looking for those openings, that permission, which usually comes during a crisis. And think about that. Even for you and I, a lot of times our own faith gets rocked the most during a crisis, where we actually then have the most chance of change and of growth. And it's not when things are good. So in some weird way, you're actually praying for that, for a crisis that you can then be walking alongside. The other thing you said was, what do I call them? What have you heard or been taught, or what's, yes?
Here's a question from a mom in the audience. My daughter has come out to me as bisexual. She knows Scripture. She knows how I feel about the specific issue. But in our home, it is no different than any other sin or heterosexual inappropriate relationships. We talk about it. She's just getting ready to start dating. She turned 17 on Monday. She wasn't allowed to before. The rules are still the same. The difference is she will never have another girlfriend spend the night for a slumber party. But those are things that we are talking about. She knows I love her. She knows I don't necessarily agree, and there's more room to grow. Her stepbrother also started out as a stepsister. He has totally transitions with the surgeries and everything. She knows my belief on that. She also knows I don't believe in plastic surgery or getting other things augmented. You don't carve out the body that God gave you. It is really hard to remember to call Carson he when he is in my home. He is her dad's fiance's son. And so it is really important, I think, especially for the transgender children, with what they are going through, that you meet them right where they are at. And once you do that, you have the chance to build that relationship. You have to love them first. And because I am literally living this in my life right now, and trust me, it is not something I ever wanted, I used to be of the belief when I was younger that God meant there to be boys and girls, and that was what I was brought up with. So this is a complete change for me. But it doesn't change Scripture. It doesn't change my core belief in what God's Word says.
And that's where I think we're challenged the most, is that more Christians than ever before are walking away from what would be a traditional sexual ethic to adopt a different one because it seems the most loving thing to do. And like, if you look at the heart behind a lot of those individuals, the heart is actually in the right place. And they're dead wrong. But every one of us, if we were to really talk through this and wrestle through it, we all have strong opinions about certain pieces of this. Other parts, we're like, I've never really thought about it. But you still have an opinion if we just ask you the question. We all have. And if you think of where we meet someone at, I love what you said, you meet them where they're at. That's a hard one for me too. A young lady who's transitioned to a male, do you call him by his new name? And by male pronouns. Well, do you want to go closer and build a relationship, or do you want further divide? You're uncomfortable. Yes, welcome to ministry. I'm seriously uncomfortable with that too. Welcome to ministry. Now then it gets so much more difficult when it's our own family, when it's our own children, because we have certain rules and certain expectations, which then challenges them. There is actually a new category that's in the research on all this about abuse and trauma and all that kind of stuff. And it's growing up in an overly religious home causes, and the list is scary actually, that a lot of times some of us growing up in certain homes, the results look very similar to growing up in a home where there was no boundaries. The exact opposite of the intent of these moms and dads that love their kids. And I look at my own kids and I'm like, I don't want them to grow up and just be nice, like good little Christians. No one changed the world like that, by the way. It was kind of more obnoxious people that have changed the world. It's a little more out of control. How do I raise a son and two sons and a daughter who are dangerous for the gospel, but have a heart of gold, have a heart that can walk into conversations? That's the difficult tension, if you will, because it challenges my beliefs. Because I would say in some sense we have very almost black and white on a lot of these things. Right and wrong done, why are we talking about this? It's like, well, it could still be true. Do I want to grow closer to you and actually journey with you? Do I have my son or daughter come back for Thanksgiving or Christmas with their new same-sex partner? Or they've left and now they've transitioned. How do I keep that relationship? I work with a lot of adults, so parents of adult children who've transitioned that, I mean, their heart is saying, you're dead to me. That's self-protection. Because the other part of their heart is dying for them. What do I do? How do I engage that? Then the next thing they wrestle with is, do I attend the wedding? Which is another hard thing to answer.
Here's a question from a 20-something-year-old single adult. I am part of this generation where we have the non-binary or female-male transgender, bisexual, and homosexual. I grew up before I became a Christian knowing about it and thinking that it was okay because my birth mom is bisexual. Just recently, my cousin, she became non-binary, so now I have to call her by different pronouns. I'm adjusting pretty well because I have friends who go by he or she or they or them. Some people think that's wrong, but seeing it from the point of view that I see it, because I was raised that it was okay. I think of how in the Bible it says in one of God's commandments to love thy neighbor. And I don't judge anyone. I don't blame anyone for making the decisions they do. I think it's part of God's plan until they decide to change, or that maybe something in their brain will change that might make them want to change, and that God still loves them in his heart wholeheartedly, and that he is just letting them choose. He guides them along, so that's just my point of view.
Well, you said a lot. That's what you just said was a lot of different pieces, which are important, because the love piece is really important. If you actually look at Soul Force and other, the Metropolitan Community Church and the queer theology even, it's so interesting how much they camp on love. But it's love me and it's a period. There's no discipleship. There's no, actually the gospel says, come to me as you are, but I'm going to light a fire under your tail till kingdom come. I'm going to grow you. I'm going to mature you. We've lost that completely if we're not careful. So it's being able to hold this love that's actually sometimes the most loving prayer that we pray as a parent is, God, put them in jail. Break them. May they almost overdose. Things that just none of us would really want to say that, but it's almost like, God, do whatever it takes to break them to come to the foot of the cross. Instead, we're praying protection and praying actually the stuff to continue if we're not careful, out of a different heart of love, but it's not one that's necessarily biblical, which is a scary. And so the words you will use are important. I'd actually say bisexual, by the way. The other category that's actually growing right now is asexual. I'm not sexual. I'm not attracted to anyone. There's just kind of nothing there. Yeah. Well, here's an interesting. There's another one too. Have you heard of the incels? Incel?
Is that intersectional?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Incel, involuntary celibate.
Oh, yeah.
It's called a nerd.
It's actually a group. It's actually a group. Is it like, I think it's 4 or 5 or 6 of the last 7 men that have walked into a place and shot people were a part of this group. And the belief is, I'm involuntary celibate. I deserve a girl, and so you should give me one. Because I can't get one, because I'm a dork. Or I'm quiet, or I'm a nerd, or It's scary, actually, because there's this movement, and here's where we're at in our culture. We are actually in the point, and this has been a year or more that we've been there, but now pedophilia is another sexual orientation. If I'm attracted to children, now it's still not saying it's okay to act on it. We'll get there eventually. But if I'm attracted to children, it's another orientation, and how dare you judge me? Polyamory is more the norm in Portland and Seattle and kind of along this I-5 corridor than anywhere in the United States. It's, hey, whatever makes you happy. It's like, really? Where's the gospel? Where's a need for any kind of savior if it's all, I got this? And if you think of our identity, none of us have this. Some of you are married. Let's talk about your marriage. How's that going? Great. Well, it could be better. How's single life? What are you struggling with? We can all agree we're all in different places, but we are not who we are meant to be in Christ. No matter what age. Actually, I would say the older we get, the more we realize, oh my gosh, I'm not. It's the younger, like my teenager, that thinks they know everything. But in this generation of that being so many around me being, it's so normal and comfortable, if we're not careful, we are desensitized as well. Bisexuality, I mean, attraction to me is the really scary data. If that's the data I use to make steps towards and away from people only, sure, guy, girl, whoever, old, young, there's no discrimination, if you will. And the fact is Scripture is telling us, no, there actually is. Another area that I work in, and I love this too, it's hard, but mixed orientation couples. Husband, wife, and husband's having gay affairs. They finally call, and it's like helping him get home and stay home. And how do I love my wife? And seeing that marriage thrive. It's actually one of the most beautiful things. I mean, the other term we've used is gay Christian, or celibate gay Christian, which is, every one of these terms we could throw out are offensive to someone. Certain people don't like gay or don't like queer, and others love it. It's so hard to know what to do, where it's like any word is almost an area of you're going to get a lawsuit on you for anything. It's scary, especially church, schools, government, places. But gay Christian means I am a man or a woman who's attracted to the same sex, and I'm choosing to die to that. Because I know this may be shocking, but sex isn't a need. No one dies without it. Or from Scripture, a guarantee. But yet we kind of have learned to believe that. Sexuality is such a part of our world that it's this incel. I'm an involuntary celibate, so find me someone, oh gosh, think of how arrogant are you now? Versus, well actually, now how attractive are you? 0. Asexuality, so I am not sexual. If you're a male and you're asexual, it means you just have low testosterone. Because God put this incredible little zippy drug in you that and every man that has a healthy sex life and sex drive has probably normal testosterone levels. If it's higher, they tend to not be very stay-at-home types. And if it's lower, it's like they're dead and what's wrong with you? And no, that's low testosterone. And one of the things that I actually address in the book really a lot is the neurochemistry of who we are says a lot about God's design. And what we're doing in our culture is bucking all of that. There is no man that has transitioned a woman who's a woman or will ever understand any of you ladies in this room, right? You're still biologically a man. Here's where we're actually having trouble. So a key area is when you walk into the ER, we need to know whether you're a male or female. There are certain very critical things about the differences in terms of how we treat certain issues, especially the more deadly. This is becoming a nightmare for hospitals, but they have to stay politically correct to stay in business, and so Mum's the word. This is scary. When you can put an X on your driver's license and this is actually down the road, life and death, because we don't know. And surgeries can be done so well that it takes a while for us to realize, oh wait, this isn't a female, this is male. And that changes everything because of treatment. If you think back to, again, design, God made male and female for a purpose. So if you think of a wedding, let's go into that one a second. Do I attend the wedding? Preston Sprinkle, if you don't know him, great stuff, great man, but he totally changed my view on this. I've always had the view that you do not even attend a wedding unless you are endorsing the marriage. And then I dealt with a mom and dad who refused to go to their daughter's wedding, both professors. They refused to attend because they disagreed with who their daughter was marrying. It's like, did that burn a bridge or build one? Yeah, you're never seeing your grandkids. Guarantee that. They're so hurt over this. It's so hard, it's horrible. And I started kind of going, okay, maybe I'm not quite right with this belief. And then, do you attend your gay wedding, lesbian wedding, yes or no? And Preston one day said, it's a very simple answer in a sense. It's not a wedding. Nothing is sealed in heaven and nothing is sealed on earth. And I'm like, oh, that changes everything. They know what I believe. Am I going to come and walk alongside you? Yes. You know what I believe. I don't need to say it. And what am I journeying toward? This is the long game. I'm journeying beside you through, this happy part, and you know what I believe. Because one day it's going to all fall apart. Something's going to fall apart. It does for all of us, by the way. And I want to be right there, and I want to be the voice that you're going to listen to when I say, do you think you might be missing something? That when you make it all about you, you're missing something? Can I introduce you to somebody? And then Jesus comes in the picture. He was there the whole time. But he's more patient than we are. We're kind of short attention span. What if it's when they're 50, 60, 70 that we're having this conversation? Are you willing to stay in that game that long? And with the students you're serving, you don't have that kind of time, do you? What if all you're doing right now in the season of that kid's life is planting seeds? As someone else, like when I sit in college and talk to that college kid, or when I sit down with a couple 10, 20 years later and deal with them, what if you've planted a seed in your ministry that I get to come over here and I get to see some of the fruit, or someone else? It's actually it's humbling. The hardest thing is I don't necessarily get to see results right now. And what do I do with that?
A question from a mom. Do you think sometimes we get stuck, and I think sometimes I get stuck, thinking I have to do all of God's work? I'm the only one that has to change someone.
No, just you. That's just you.
And she continues, I think for me, that's where I came to. He is the only one that actually has to change the heart. I can only be there when he does that.
And who is this? Is it Amanda that spoke earlier? Just amazing. So good to hear what she had to say and her story and kind of going into the trauma piece. 100% of us moms and dads, by the way, you're a miserable failure. If you didn't know that already, just let me tell you. You are going to mess your kids up. Get that. Here's the coolest thing you can give your kids. Can you tell them you're sorry? Can you show that you're fallible? Can you actually be a mom or dad that says, I made a mistake? That is a better gift than some perfect parent that they walk away and go, and you can keep your God thing too. Think about that. Be teachable no matter where you're at, and it changes that relationship. Moms and dads, we all fail. My 3 experiments, I can see it. So especially my oldest right now is 13, and it's like, oh gosh, he's got me in him. And then Kelly's over there going the same thing. So we have different parts of us that are not always the prettiest parts, and it's like, dang it, we see it in them. And what do? We don't ignore it. We run straight into it and talk about it. Yeah, you're doing that thing that I do, and I'm sorry I passed that down to you. And I hope you'll learn to steward it better than I did. I'm sorry one of mine's the spiritual gift of sarcasm, which I have a hard time with.
Amen.
And Until my son looks at me and goes, Dad, I don't know whether you're telling the truth or lying. I'm like, oh, shoot. And so each of us are shaped by those caregivers. I remember Amanda made that comment about just, it takes one person that believes in me that changes the world. And that's many times you in what you're doing right now. Can you hang on to that when you don't see the data showing conversions or showing change? Can they go ahead and go from male transition, hormones, surgeries, the whole works, and now they're a female, and them still be God still loves them just the same, and God's still pursuing them just the same, and then they come to Christ, and yeah, it's going to be hard. Oh, is it going to be hard? The number of men and women right now who are regretting those surgeries it's growing by leaps and bounds. It should not be done on kids either.
Another question from a participant. I have run into the issue of when we have an event, especially for girls, or especially for boys. Some of them are like, well, that's how I identify, so I should be invited to that. What's a good way to approach that, or an appropriate way to have that conversation?
I mean, we're not going to be able to do that almost.
Right.
Like, those are going to become it surprises me actually some of the ways that we demand there's no gender stuff and then still go, like we were at REI the other day and they're talking about this one's a boy one and this is a girl's one. I'm like, isn't that not allowed to say that? Because what if I identify, oh gosh, this is so hard. I had a client's daughter who, when I met her, I had no idea, I could never have known she was a girl. Just the way she presented herself. She binds her chest, cut short hair. The school district calls the parent and says, so we're going on this field trip and we're not sure who to room your daughter with or who to room the name with. It's like, because they're making the judgment for you. She is never identified as anything else. She just is. And she likes a lot of sports and stuff. And they're going to go, and think about that. So they're going to go on a field trip to somewhere else for multiple days. Yeah, let's put her in the room with a bunch of guys. We'll see how that goes. This comes back to parents. This is where, and this is not necessarily where you have much control, which is the scariest part of where you're at. In the end, I would say all this ends up coming back on us as moms and dads in areas we seriously did fail in. When our kids are learning things that, let's actually use California example. Last year they said that you have to teach in kindergarten all 15 genders. I'm like, Zuckerberg is in California and Facebook has 72, so they're behind the times. California, gosh, 15 only? Well, think about if your son or daughter is going to that school, wouldn't it be awesome to get a call from the principal's office because your kid got in trouble because you already taught them at home? And they went, teacher, there's only 2. And anyway, they're going to learn from somewhere. So if you're going to send them to learn from the school, teach them at home first. And that will change what's then received at school. So for us as parents, that our kid, we need to teach this stuff earlier so they're not going, masturbation, what's that? Oh, we already talked about that.
Corey,
yeah.
Here's an earnest question from a dad from the audience. We put a lot of value in doing activities with kids where we have girls together doing stuff that they engage with together, and we are doing stuff with guys. They're engaged with much less distraction, and we put a lot of value in that. Do you think those days are in the past, and or will we need to change that?
I actually hope there's about to be a big shift. The LGB is pushing against the T right now really strong, saying, I don't want to be, y'all have gone a little too far here. And so it's going to be interesting to see the next year or two what happens with that. And I hope there will be some shifts to common sense in some of this. Do we need those times? Yes. We do Boy Scouts. I'm a Scoutmaster with our troop. It's Boy Scouts. The groups in Salem that have merged boys and girls, which they're supposed to be totally separate. The model is actually very well done. It's supposed to be totally separate. When they go on campouts, it's youth group, flirting, dating, a whole bunch. It's ridiculous. And so we only do boys. Kelly runs the American Heritage Girls with my daughter, and we do that. But that's growing. Boys, girls, it's supposed to stay separate. The transgender child is going to be an issue always with our events.
His dad continues, is there a loving response to when we get that question? Is there a loving way to have that conversation?
At this point, there is not. Okay. And this is, so go back to 1989 and the way after the ball, that's actually what was set up. There's only two answers. So a church, can a church be loving? Only if it's affirming. And the only other alternative is you hate me. And here's an interesting Marin, I forgot his first name, who lived in the downtown area, or the kind of the gay part of Chicago. I forgot the area, what it was called. He said when these men and women wanted to go to church on Sunday, did they go to the liberal church or the conservative church? Those people that actually wanted to go to church, they did not go to the liberal one. The liberal church is dying when it comes to that. The numbers are plummeting. Why? They said, I don't want to go somewhere where I'm coddled and told I'm just fine. I want to go somewhere where I'm actually challenged to grow in my faith. Because their faith was very real. And sometimes we have a hard time wrestling with that. A faith that's real and I'm gay. Or I feel like I'm a boy in a girl's body or a girl in a boy's body. Those seem in opposition. It's like, no, we are all broken. And that's where the data, and that's kind of how I talk about it, is attraction is just data. It's like we are giving a little too much weight to whom I'm attracted to. If I'm attracted to boys and girls, then I guess I'm bisexual. It's like, and this is the hardest thing. If they haven't done anything, we can have some neat conversations. Once they start experimenting, it's harder to know who I am. Why? Because I was talking to this one girl, she said, she came in my office and she said that she was in a lesbian relationship and I know that's wrong and what do I do? And I said, tell me more. And she was shocked. She expected condemnation. I said, no, tell me more about the physical part, which made her even more hesitant to talk. I was like, when you and her were together and your arms were wrapped around each other and you were naked and close, did it feel amazing? She goes, yes. I go, yes, because God designed that to be so if you've deemed the other person safe. Doesn't matter the age, doesn't matter the gender, doesn't matter any of that in that moment. If I in my head and heart deem them safe. It's why the exact same thing is trauma if it's not a person that's safe. I go, so then what's wrong? Kind of leaving it up to her, and she's like, what's wrong in the Bible? I'm like, show me. And then it's fun to watch her create her own, show me her belief right there. I don't want to have that as part of my story. I was like, oh, okay. What do you want? And she starts into a different story of, she's actually a missionary overseas, has been single her whole adult life. I think it's been 20 years now of ministry, and it's beautiful, her story and her testimony, but she came from brokenness. Can we have girl events and say, sorry, only biological girls? If you draw that line, there will be repercussions. What's scary is it may end up kicking you out of the school system in terms of some of the ministry opportunities.
Here's a statement from an audience member. The only way I can see this viably happening is personally inviting people and not broadcasting that you're inviting a dozen people and keeping the event smaller. If you're going to broadcast it, I don't see any way of not having lashback from a parent at some point. It is going to happen.
That's where this bathrooms issue is, I demand I can use that bathroom. Well, no, here's this other one or turn them all into locks. And yes, sir.
A question from an audience member. So during registration this last year, we had a lady ask me about camp. We advertised camp at the beginning of the year. A lady came up to me and said, I have to talk to you. She was whispering in my ear. She said that her daughter, who actually is a boy, wants to go to camp. And what would you do? What room would you put her in? And I said that we were going to be thinking about this situation because it's coming up. But at this particular time, if it's a boy by birth, he goes in the boys' room. If they are a girl by birth, they go in the girls' room. This mom was so disappointed. She was hoping that he could be with the boys. I think that some of the problems we are going to see is that if you put a boy in adolescence with the girls, we're going to have a very different story.
And think about that young lady who's really wrestling with her sexual identity. and she's stuck. And what usually goes along with this story, she looks at the girls around her, so put her in that cabin with the other girls, and she's like, they're a bunch of freaks. They're weird. They like all this girly stuff that it's actually, here's the funny connection to that. My wife looked at this flyer that talked about the women's retreat. And she looked at the list of the things that they're going to do, and she's like, no, hell no, not on your life. And I looked at it and go, ooh, I want to go. Because I spent my teen years and college years and got married in late 20s going, what's wrong with me? Because everything I like doesn't fit my gender. And then I meet this amazing woman who has a total male brain and has the way she thinks is analytical. She's got little boxes. I have the spaghetti. She's the guy, I'm the girl. But in the end, us coming together, it's like she's so the girl and I'm so the guy, and God's design is so perfect and we are so messed up. And part of where we're at is our conversations today about gender, I think, are actually accurate, because I spent all those years struggling, not knowing that I was just fine, but I'm trying to pigeonhole myself into what everyone else was saying I was supposed to be. I didn't do sports. I was a music guy. Until I met her, everything I wore was pink and purple and any other color that was just bright. But I also grew up in Chile as a missionary kid, and she called me the happy Hispanic, is kind of what I dressed like. And I was like, that's what I culturally grew up with. And came to America and my senior year of high school, and I was I grew up always standing out like a sore thumb, and all of a sudden I'm a nobody. And I started doing more things to stand out, not realizing. A lot of student stories is that girl walks into that dorm or that cabin with all these girls, and she's like, I don't fit here. And the honest truth is, she walks in the guys, she won't fit there either. She's in a serious place of crisis. So then it's the conversations that let her unpack, who am I? Well, no, I don't want you to be like all those prissy little girls in tutus. Forget those dumb little dresses and all the stuff that they like. Like, have that conversation that draws out, but so what do you like? I like hunting. Great. So does that mean you have to have a pink gun or something? No. She likes camo and she likes trucks and it's funny how we start turning this into this thing that's always been there, tomboy, but it's now become sexual identity. I must be in the wrong body. No. God did not make a single mistake here. And so how can that young lady thrive as a woman, but in a very different way? How can that young man thrive as a man, but I don't fit that stereotype? What's happening is we have also men that are just like, I'm going to buck the whole system and I'm going to do whatever, makes me happy in a sense. And it's like, yeah, that doesn't really work either. Like, our world becomes about just me and you have to appease me. So then you have, and this becomes one of the struggles with camp, the biggest struggle ends up being the parents. We had a young man that was in our Cub Scout troop, and the parents were just strong advocates. And it's like, they're pushing for everything. More just because they wanted to. They like to stir up trouble. And I was like, okay, you can, but this is where we draw the line. This is what we're going to do. That's separate. When you're in the schools, you're dealing with a very different conversation. It's more the one-on-ones when they're in crisis. It's more the letting them unpack their own theology, their belief system. And then finding those little places you can just lay a little truth bomb and walk away. You're not fixing them. They've actually been told, most people have been told who they are by too many people. They don't need us doing the same thing. They need you walking alongside going, tell me more about that attraction. What do you think that means? What if it doesn't mean what you think it means? What if you've built it up bigger than it actually was intended to be? And then maybe you share some of your story. Like, I'm married, and yeah, attraction, that's easy. Stewardship's hard. That this isn't separate from everyone else. We're all in that same boat. in terms of how we steward emotions and attractions and desires and how we create boundaries. Why? Because I actually love you. Oh, well, that doesn't sound like the love I've ever been taught. No, because it comes from somewhere else. And you're walking them to the cross. You're walking them to a different story. What I have found is a key in the conversation with, especially teens and children, is letting them be the expert and letting them talk themselves into a corner. A lot of times we want to be the expert and we want to talk. It's like, what if I let them, okay, what does that look like? Let's fast forward in the future and let's play this out. And it's like, does that work? Does that really make you happy? And then they're like, no. What are you really searching for? Because the truth is that identity piece is critical. Now, here's another. So have you heard of Erickson's stages of development? What's the first stage of development? It's trust versus mistrust. Think about how many of the kids you're working with who've been traumatized in some way, and the adolescent development is identity versus role confusion. Who am I? If they're stuck, and part of the theory is if you're stuck in a previous stage, you can't work through the next stage. So they're facing adolescence and you're struggling with identity, or even pre-adolescence, but they're still messed up over here about trust. This conversation needs to wait almost. We need to start rebuilding that little person. And part of it is you. Them trusting you. Them having that little victory of someone who's on my side, even if you totally disagree with what they're doing. And they need to help see that. It's okay to love you and disagree with what you're doing, because that's not fit in the story that's been laid out in front of us. Ironically, that's oftentimes not the church. It's come be a part of the church after you've put your ducks in a row, versus, no, right here as you are, the mess you are, and we'll journey through this together. That's a harder reality. If you think of youth group, let's have a vetting process. I only want youth that are actually at this level, if you will. It's like, I work a lot with the homeschool community. It's amazing how many of them just don't let their kids go to youth group. And it's like, well, I work with the homeschool community, as in, and then they end up in my office because oftentimes they've overprotected and not prepared. A lot of the other kids I work with, it's that 10, 11, 12-year-old who perpetrated because of zero preparation. How did they all of a sudden discover this? Because they're human. Curiosity. So we need to teach them younger about these things and about pornography. And what's crazy is boys and girls way back when kind of had this certain mark of when I was an adult, especially in the United States. It's around 16, and it was when you got a driver's license. Nowadays, kids aren't getting their driver's license. They don't care because they can meet virtually. So why? Are some of y'all like, yes, that's me? Or it's not. So that doesn't work. So what is it? So based off research, this is the scariest thing. What is it that kids and teens identify as I'm an adult? Or they use to identify as an adult? Nope.
Cell phone.
What? Cell phone? Yes. Smartphone. And how old are they getting these? Yeah. Elementary school? I got the world. Well, they did. You just gave them the world. I call these porn portals, by the way. This is a porn portal. If you had never seen one, hello. You open Safari. Do what? You open Safari, you go to Google, and what do? PORN, and you're in a different world. You click on images or videos, you're in a different world. That's how close they've just been given the world in this device that's more powerful than what took us to the moon in 1969. This is ridiculous. Cal Newport, researcher, not a Christian, He believes that he said this about 2 years ago, he said in the next 5 years, he believes that we will be appalled at the parent that would give even their 13 or 14-year-old a cell phone, a smartphone, because of the damage that it's causing teens. Apple last year added a feature, and it's how many hours you've spent on each thing. The reason why they added that was because the pressure from their stakeholders was girls are killing themselves at a higher rate than ever because of these phones. Because of what? Yeah, comparison. Social media comparison. Girls. That was just girls. So then what's happening to boys? Because that was just for girls.
School shootings? Is that related to school shootings?
Nope. That's a handful there. We're losing our boys. There's 3 key areas that are contributing to the loss of our sons. We're losing that. I can't even almost define that anymore.
Because of violence, sexualization, and masculinity, I think.
No. Porn is one, so the sexualization. Porn is killing our kids. You got 17, 18-year-olds that have erectile dysfunction. They can't get an erection because they've so destroyed their brain as to what's stimulating they need is drugs. They need more and more and more and more, bigger, worse, just more disgusting, more gross, more even violent. And then they meet a girl and good luck with that. Porn is a big one. The biggest one right now is overuse of video games. It's the obsessive video game play. Video games can be a great stress reliever. It's when it takes over. It's when friends come over and I go, and this is my world now. The third one's absent fathers. Almost 100% of the guys that have walked into schools and done this shooting had an absent father. A very key common thread among those boys. We talk about moms, we celebrate moms, we have Mother's Day and go crazy over moms, and what do we do on Father's Day?
We get nothing.
We get nothing. Actually, we tend to do a good job of shaming you. Condemnation. Versus you are probably the number one indicator of your kid's health or lack thereof is the dad. Some of us who've been through divorces, that's scary. Some of us who've been through other struggles, that's scary actually. Here's how you kind of change that data a little bit. The default is they're going to be kind of worshiping whatever dad worships. This needs to be made overt in conversation. So think of that young boy or girl you're talking to at school. As you talk about their dad, and you probably get a pretty messed up story, you start making the connection that it's not just dad, it's other male figures even in your life that you look up to. And they may have this one uncle, or they may have this, or it's you that becomes the saving grace. The single moms I talk to, one of the struggles I have is they're like, I've got to be both mom and dad. I'm like, that's impossible. What if you were the best mom in the world and you found in some amazing group of guys to be that male influence? Dad's not, that's a loss. But he and she both need that male back to God's design, which is perfect. They need that influence. At our Boy Scout troop, moms aren't allowed on campouts, which is very non-PC today. Because we're adamant that we are under the men's ministry and it's dads mentoring sons. And I look at the single moms and I go, and you can't come. And they go, thank you. I go, because I want your son to go so that I can love on him. And then I tell my sons, you're going to be jealous when I'm over there talking to some of those boys because I'm not with you. But I'm also setting this up for you because there are things you're not going to want to talk to me about, that I want you to have certain dads that I've kind of vetted a little bit, that you're going to actually be close enough to that you'll go talk to them maybe. That's community. It should be the body of Christ.
A good question from a dad. With dads being that important, is there a difference between children being raised by single fathers versus single mothers?
I would like to see a study on that. I have not seen one. So there's your dissertation right there. Go for it. Yeah, the studies on fatherhood is incredible. You don't see them published almost anywhere on fatherhood because it's too offensive. We deify motherhood. And moms, you're important, but it's interesting to look at the data. Kids grow up and look to dad for too much. The more I've learned this, it terrifies me to my core as a dad. And it should. It should be an awesome responsibility, a heavy responsibility. And so I've worked with a lot of single dads, and is there a loss there too? Yes. Just like any divorce, and the couples I work through divorce, it's like, your kid, I hear it all the time, my kids are resilient. I was like, no, you're not, you're messing them up. Own that, and again, we have a different conversation. Don't own that, and you probably did worse. Part of that's that me being honest. What do most kids and teens want? Just be honest with me. They really do in the end, after I've gained that permission to come in and to have those conversations. Are you bisexual? It's like, actually, wrong question. It's who you're going to be. You can be attracted to whoever you want to be attracted to. You can be 18 and I just am really attracted to 60-year-olds. Great. There's probably a reason in your story that put that as a reality. What if that doesn't matter? What kind of person are you going to be? And you start having these conversations, they start realizing, ooh, I actually have more choice. And it's interesting if you look historically. So, 2.5 years ago, we had the vote for gay marriage, right? Right before that vote, up until that vote, billions and billions and billions of dollars were spent on research to prove there's a gay gene. 0 findings. And what I actually said from stages and different places I spoke at 15 plus years ago, let's just say there is. It still doesn't change anything. They found alcoholism gene, and doesn't mean you have to do certain things. It's called epigenetics. We turn on and turn off our genetics based off choices. I feel like I do have the genetic predisposition to alcoholism because of family. I've never had a sip of alcohol because I'm terrified of what I would do. I'm terrified of myself. Now, when I was younger, I didn't make the decision that way. It was made for me by parenting. And some of us comply, some of us don't. At least that part I did. But the genetic piece, so it was, thanks to Lady Gaga, I was born this way. That was the theme. Gay marriage vote. Within a week or two, gender fluidity. It's like, guys, you can't have it both ways. And that's where we're at now. Since that vote, the conversation has been all about gender fluidity. I can move around. It's like, it's one or the other. You can't. Or we have, speaking of Oregon, just do whatever makes you happy. Your sexual self and teens, they're just all going to have sex. Just do it. Oh, and by the way, there's this news report that says that the STDs in Oregon are on the rise. I wonder why.
Because they're not getting tested often enough, clearly. That's what the doctors will tell you.
That's the
terrible
problem he has there.
So terrible. Like, I was actually kind of excited or glad when Tiger Woods had his affairs and that came out. There was a backlash, which actually showed that people tend to be a lot more conservative on that. It was actually very telling. Because really, based off the culture and movies, we should all have been like, good job, man! Go get another one. That's what my kids are seeing when we watch TV, right? That's what they're seeing when they watch practically any show. Most kids have seen 13 Reasons Why. You need to talk about it. If you haven't seen it, sit down and watch it. And that's a harsh thing to do. They've already watched it. When that show came out, I polled my college class 2 weeks after it came out. I was like, does anyone see that? Over half the class had been watched it the weekend before. There's 3 seasons now. Season 3 is horrible. It's like a soap opera. There's some redeeming pieces of it when the counselor actually faces his demons there. Season 2 is kind of revealing, but season 1 is it's cuss words like crazy. It has a rape scene at the end. It is a horrible, horrible, horrible show in the sense of all these restrictions we might have as a Christian. It's the reality that these kids are facing, watching, consuming, and believing. The suicide rate has gone up since that show, according to some studies, mainly because of lack of conversations about it. Have those conversations. Talk through what happened. Why were there these 13 people that knew little pieces of the story, but none of them had the whole, and she ends up killing herself? If you haven't heard of that, by the way, it's the girl's dead, and she's left 13 cassette tapes to tell of the 13 people that knew certain pieces that pieces together her whole story. Which is the case for most kids that do commit suicide. Them? No way, I never would have. Or there's this one piece of the story that all of a sudden that fits in. Oh, now that makes sense what they said. Well, you now have a piece of that puzzle. Then you have guilt, except you didn't know the whole story. And there's a lot of shows like that our kids are consuming like crazy, that's shaping their brain development. You heard the TV show Big Mouth? I don't think I made it 3 minutes of it, and it's so disgusting and vile and not okay. Yet, again, consumed as a whole. It's a cartoon, but it's the masturbation monster and all this just gross, graphic, sexual, hey, whatever makes you happy, and it shapes. So the reality of where we're at in those conversations is we probably need to at least know some about these things to engage in where they're at if we want to walk them towards, what if there was a different story about this? What if I could tell you a completely different future you could have when I have that permission? And that's the long game. That's the difficult journey that we have. How do I love them? Well, it's discipleship, right? It's walking alongside, and maybe I don't have permission to share scripture right now. But when I do, it's going to be fun. Or I can't say it's chapter verse, but I can tell you of a parable, or I can tell you of a story, or I can tell you of oh wait, Jesus did that. It's powerful what we can do in that journey towards them, maybe finding a new story for them. One of my favorite counseling approaches is the narrative therapy approach. It's that storying a person's life. You don't just end up at 18 making certain choices. You are a sum total and a fractured total of all these past things that sometimes it's this one thing back here in my story that I didn't realize led to this choice right here. What I have found is when you make that connection, their whole future changes. The biggest one there is with trauma, with sexual abuse. This thing happened bad. I never realized this influences what my choices are here. What we've learned in trauma therapy is you don't have to go back and re-experience all that bad stuff and go through all the junk to find freedom. A lot of it's just this awareness that so influences who I am today, and I actually, and this is the model I use, get it out of my operating system, my unconscious, or my non-conscious, where it's rattling around in there and I'm going crazy. Choose, take every thought captive. And then the even more powerful one is confession. That there's something about talking through, which is where you come in. And you tend to come in those last two of helping someone take something rattling around in there, moving it to the, no, you have choice. You always have choice. And then there's a whole, we could talk for hours on this one too, but how impaired am I in that choice based off my story or based off choices? You take one hit of certain drugs, that second hit is, you have very little choice over now. Because your biology is taken over, you're in trouble. And so that's part of why they talk about certain gateway drugs, and it leads, and it's true, as the more you do certain things, the more numb you get. Well, that's the same with sex, same with pornography. Actually, it's the same with sin, right? The more I sin and do the same thing, the more I justify. And what's funny is now I've changed my theology to line up with my behavior. versus, no, this is what I said I chose to be. I need some work, help. That's what I love to do. I work with all families and couples, and I do actually mostly in-home counseling. I come to there from Eugene to Portland, and I sit in homes and I work through helping that teenager that this happened, and mom and dad and their marriage issues, and it's kind of the whole gamut of stuff. That's that getting that third party, which again, that's every single one of you in here. You're on that front line to minister to people. What are some stories of people you're thinking of right now? Some of the kids that you're working with.
Here's a rough question from a participant. I have not met every gay person, but every gay person I have met has been sexually assaulted when they were young, by a family member or a neighbor or someone. Am I an idiot for thinking that?
Yes. So just simple answer, yes. Statistically, you're correct. Statistically, you're right. More often than not, yes, there is a history of abuse. But in this room right here, what's the numbers that you've heard about sexual abuse for women and for men?
1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 men, 4 is under the age of 18.
1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 men. That's based off self-report, which is the worst form of... What's the actual probably reality when you add in how many times people like me in counseling, no, nothing bad happened, or that was an abuse, and now they realize that was so assault, and I didn't realize that, and it's probably 1 in 2 women and 1 in 3 men. So statistically, gosh, yes, they were, and so were almost half of this room. Honestly, that's scary. And how many times I talk to pastors who go, no, we don't have those problems in our church. And I go, oh. Or youth pastors are the worst. My youth ministry's going great. I'm like, then you stink. Because you're not safe. Because they won't come to you with their real problems. You're playing games. So you want a barometer of whether you're doing right? If you want to quit, you're probably doing this right. Honestly, right? Right? Because you engage in that conversation, you got to go home and carry the weight of that every single day. It would be easier just la 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 la. Ignorance is bliss. And so the guy that actually, the founder of reparative therapy, who passed away a few years ago, Nicolosi, I totally disagree with reparative therapy, always have, because of the model has been, we're going to straighten you out, fix you. And Yar House has done incredible research to tick everybody off on both sides of the whole thing, basically to say you can't. Have some softened or changed? Absolutely. Have some surrendered? Absolutely. But we tend to not change that drastically, if you will. It becomes stewardship. In his work with men, he would say 100% of them had dad issues. And then I go, well, who doesn't? Just kidding. Okay. That data doesn't help me love someone, though. Which is really, in the end, it's like... And so what we've done in the church is we've made comments like, well, everyone's been sexually abused. And then there's that guy like, no, not me. Because oftentimes they didn't realize when that babysitter molested them that they're supposed to have been offended by that. It was kind of awesome. Why? Because we actually breed boys to think sex is always supposed to be a good thing. And that becomes cultural. And a lot of times what I find is that young man didn't realize that, well, first of all, that was totally inappropriate, but you were changed that day. And something was born in you that's dangerous now. And fast forward 20 years, you still don't see that was actually sexual assault. You were taken advantage of by someone else. That shapes you. And what's really cool is to talk to that young man who's now 30, 40 years old, and they don't see that did change me. And no wonder I'm all over the map, wrestling with and struggling with stuff. Here's the other side of that equation, though. I've had multiple men that we would actually probably build an altar around them and put them on this pedestal Because there are these men that they've never looked at pornography, they've never masturbated, they are the epitome of the godly man. And they come to me for premarital, and I do their premarital, and this amazing young lady, and they walk into marriage, and they're in my office within 2 weeks after the wedding. Because he can't get an erection to save his life with his wife right there in front of her, and she's in tears. Because he's not human. If you've mastered yourself to the point of not being human, that is not biblical either. But if we're not careful, that's what we're actually teaching our kids. Control yourself so well that you turn everything off. And then they get married and they're like, where's the switch? A lot of girls, I think, do that as well. They learn to be that good little girl and they're asexual. And then they get married and they're still asexual. It's like, yeah, there is no switch. It's stewardship. It always comes down to stewardship. And so, oh God, why are you so cruel and turning that testosterone on at 13, 14? And I have to, well, it's stewardship. Which means we need to teach even more intentionally about managing that. And that, yeah, boys that are not busy can be kind of dangerous. Work actually is not a curse. Actually, it's part of the way we were made. And you think back before the fall, what did Adam and Eve do? I can't believe you did it naked. That's weird. But they would till, they worked the garden and they took care of this place. They didn't sit around watching YouTube videos. They had skills too. And so fast forward to today, what do our kids not have? They're bored out of their minds and they have zero skills. Or like my college students, they're like, sometimes they're like, I didn't feel like coming to class today. I'm like, yeah, good luck with that and work one day. Yet about 10 years ago, there was a Newsweek article that described that bosses need to change the way they deal with their employees because they're losing that generation. Because they'll just, well, whatever, I don't want to come in today. And they were saying the bosses need to change and coddle them more. I'm like, that creates jobs over here for those that actually want them. What do you do with that? It comes down to maybe we do need to put, I think we need to put the trades and the skills back in the school system. And people are blown away that I can fix almost anything on a house or on a car. In Georgia, we owned a house built in the 1800s. I restored and did everything: tile, plumbing, electrical. Sheetrock was hard. Oh, I cannot mud. That's hard. But there's a book for dummies at Home Depot if you don't know how. That's how I learned. And cars, same thing. But that's not normal to be able to do those things and do what I do. It's almost like you can only do one or the other. Either you're a tradesperson. And by the way, smart's not one of the things I am. It's perseverance through school. It's not what it takes. It takes a passion. When I was a music major in college and found out you had to have talent, so I went into therapy. It was a lot of tears. It was a bad time. And that didn't help my story either, being a music major, by the way, with all the other stuff I said earlier. But then I took a counseling class, and in 2 weeks after graduation, I was in seminary doing marriage and family counseling. The idea that I could help someone, I always felt a call to ministry, but I didn't realize where that would take me down the road. And it's just been neat to see. And as I talk to college students, it's like, I love to hear your dreams. Why? Because God's going to blow them out of the water. But then you'd meet those that have no dreams, and it's like, I worry for your future. Because when you shut that off, you'll settle for anything. You'll settle for anybody, relationship-wise. No, we need to help bolster that in them, especially some of the kids many of you are working with. They are stuck. Like the ability to even think on how to do a dumb math problem when I'm trying to figure out food. That becomes a stressor. Why does this matter? All these stupid classes. Yeah, I'm with you. In the end, it doesn't matter. I've had a number of homeschool families. The key thing I've told them is like, your homeschool curriculum is stupid in the sense of you've missed their heart. What's the most important thing that they get when they graduate? that they're a champion for Christ. I don't care if they can do calculus, whatever point that has. Think about it. Will they catch up with those other things? Maybe, absolutely, yes. Their heart is what actually is the most important thing. That's what you're in the business of, right? I mean, you're in the place of leading these small micro conversations towards a different story because you believed in them, because you had a vision for them, because you challenged them maybe for the first time, or challenged them gently when others did it more harshly. And that's another key thing. If their parents are gentle and soft, you might need to be a little harsher, a little more tougher. If their parents are over the top abusive, you need to be very gentle. So it's learning. That's a key counseling approach. I don't ever want to come across as a parent to my client, which is interesting why oftentimes some of the worst counselors can be women if they just play the mom role with their clients. Because more often than not, that's actually not what they need, another mom. And some of the most powerful counselors are those counselors, men or women, that actually come into the story in a very different place, with a different feel. And, they're like, yes, they get me. Which is really, really important. Yeah. Let me show you some history stuff real quick. So thinking of kind of where we came from. 1981, this came out, Gay and Straight. It's a fact the Christian community has been and continues to be a sexually oppressed and oppressive community. This is 1981. Our record, whether a corporate individual, is not good. We are, most of us, if not all of us, sons and daughters of a sexually crooked generation in desperate need ourselves of forgiveness and healing. How much more so are we in that same story right now? That's what we're missing, we're dying for. Since this time, let me show you just a few. I won't play the trailers, but you can YouTube any of them, but this came out, I Do Exist, 2004, and this actually talks through the fact that there are men and women that have left homosexuality and they're straight. The sad thing is about half of the people portrayed in this show left their spouse later and went back to a different story. And so that's just, man, gay community goes crazy. See those dumb Christians. And it's like, actually, sometimes, yes. There's truth in that. Rosaria Butterfield. If you haven't heard her story, I read her books. They're incredible. Former Syracuse University professor, tenure professor, advocate of the vote for gay marriage. I mean, she was all a part of that. And she started talking with a pastor. And the pastor and her, through trying to write a book about how dumb they were, came to Christ. Left her sexual relationship with her girlfriend and is now a married pastor's wife, homeschools her kids. And her more latest book actually says, stop putting me on some pedestal as some fixed person. She goes, I am a lesbian inside through and through in terms of attractions. And I die to that and I love my husband. And I'm so thankful for my kids. And I'm thankful for grace. And she puts it so well. That we need to be careful what we portray as success. And there's a lot of these. So there's, For the Bible Tells Me So came out in 2007. I actually sat down when this came out with a whole bunch of college students. We watched this. About half of them that were there they're living same-sex relationships and searching one after the other. Heterosexual marriage, what's the divorce rate?
50%.
It's never, ever, ever, ever been 50%. Yet almost all of us, that's all we've ever heard. Researcher Shanti Feldon in Atlanta about 3 years ago came out with a book that said, I searched for where that data came from, and it was kind of this guesstimate. At the highest it's ever been was about 33%. Ever. And I remember even at one point them saying, and in the church it's 65%, 33%. If you are a college graduate, it drops into the teens. If you don't live together, it drops into the teens. If you attend church regularly, it drops into the teens. And if all those, it's even less. It's actually kind of encouraging. Yeah. But why do we believe the 50%? Because we all know people that are divorced. Okay, now move over to homosexuality. What's the percentage of men and women that are gay? The loud and proud, I am gay, this is who I am. What's the percentage in America?
4.
Okay, 4. What else? 10, okay?
That's what I was taught.
Okay? It's under 1%. Under 1%. But let me put that in perspective a second. Society and some research says 10 to 15%. The numbers are more like males 3 to 4% and females 1 to 2%. That's including those that would say same-sex attraction. But here's the number I want you to come away with. The percentage is kind of deceiving. There are about 312 million people in the United States. We're talking at the low end, 3.1 million. At the high end, 18.7 million people. This is a real. So we can quickly go, 1%, whatever, and go move on. No, this is millions of men and women. This is why we know people. And then we kind of go, yeah, I can believe the 10%. It's not true at all. It's never been true. But that's interesting to think of how our brains work and actually how much we need, first of all, good data, but to be careful with any data. Millions of people are in this place. So the numbers here, there's opposite sex attraction, and think of Yarhouse put 3 categories: same-sex attraction, and then orientation, and then actually gay identity. And the reason why he did this is especially teens when they were struggling with identity, it's either I'm gay or I'm not. And he goes, let's move some space in between those 2 options so people can actually wrestle. And what we found is when people are actually then moving it out of the unconscious into the conscious and choosing, they realize, no, I'm not. I actually had a girl recently, adult, who she wanted to have her breasts removed and transition to male. She hated her breasts. They were really big. They were obnoxious. As we talked, second session, as we talked through this, she goes, I just realized something. I'm not transgender. I'm only gender fluid online when I'm playing games. I'm actually just fine with who I am in real life. Where does she spend most of her time, day in and day out? In her bedroom, online, living out a persona. And online, I can be anybody. And I really like kind of playing around with that gender fluidity. But in person, I'm just fine. I just really wish I could chop these suckers off. And she never came back. She's like, thanks, bye. Like, whoa. Sometimes the stories are crazy. But if we hadn't had that conversation, what was she about to actually do? They were looking at surgeries. They were looking at hormones. Because she believed I'm transgender. It's like, yeah, let's talk through that. Really? I was surprised where it ended up. Here's the percentages of this one. 6.2% of men, 4.4% of women for same-sex attraction. So there's a lot of people that really wrestle with that, and they might be attracted to the same sex. Why do we turn that into even an identity? We're putting too much weight on that, which is, we have to be careful. Orientation tends to be, I'm out. I might have even engaged in some behaviors. That 2% of men, 0.9% of women, which from Yarhouse's research basically found that gay identity was even almost not registrable on the research. Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes, ma'am.
Another statement from, or a question from a participant. I wonder how much of this, when someone has same-sex attraction and then says, oh, I'm gay, we are so quick to put on a label on ourselves or on other people. I wonder how much of this is that in God's design we are wired to have an identity and to belong, and I feel like so often people are declaring something about themselves. I see it in the parenting community. Now I'm a mom, and I have an identity. Is that some of what is going on? Adopting a label because it gives them a sense of belonging?
Absolutely, yes.
Adopting a label because that gives them a sense of belonging and
What are the other labels in high school?
nerd,
Nerd, jock, cheerleader, goth, popular, and then the rest. What else? Fan geek. Yeah, that's we just want. It's funny how much like you got, like speaking of goth, you got these kids, I'm going to be different. It's like, but you look all the same. Like, in the end, it's like, what are we doing? And that's what's happening with the gender thing. Gender, if you go to Facebook and look at them, 72 options, I don't understand 80, 90% of them. But if you talk to that person, it's pretty amazing the description that's given. So you actually look at the definitions. They're interesting and heartbreaking because you're more than that. And so, actually, back to a second ago, I asked about heterosexual marriage, quite low, the divorce rate. Affair rates are pretty high. I've even seen numbers up to even like 60%. One of my favorite things is to work with couples who've had adultery and happen. Then the marriages I've seen post adultery is beautiful. There's something about forgiveness. There's something beautiful about that second marriage, same person. Some of the harder ones are when they're just always ticked off at the stupid socks that get left on the floor and other dumb little habits. Those are harder marriages for me to help grow. They get stuck on these little things. Forgiveness is powerful. Same-sex marriages, 92% of them adultery. You centered it around sex. What do you expect? Now, here's the problem. Some of you might have neighbors and friends and family who have been married to the same person for years. Because yes, there are men and women, and there usually tend to be quiet men and women who don't leave me alone and let me live my life. 2 men, 2 women that live together, married, they're doing great. That's very few and far between. The number of sexual partners that most gay men have are 300 to 1,000 in a lifetime. We don't want to talk about that. Or we talk about things like, but they love each other. And I'm like, how do you take 2 men and do the sexual thing? Well, what do 2 gay men do? Anal sex, right? My new human sexuality textbook has a section in it that says, married heterosexual couples, you got to try this new sex. Anal sex will change your life. Try this. Why? Because you got to normalize something that's not normal. The lining of the anus is not meant for that kind of friction. One cut and fecal matter gets into the bloodstream, we're in trouble. A lot of gay men have had to have their urethra amputated. It affects our health like crazy. And women's now, because this is entering into a norm among heterosexual couples as well. Some of the websites I look at and the stories I hear, anal sex is on almost every other comment and story right now. We're trying to normalize something that's not okay. Can I point to chapter and verse? And this is what part of where this book is important. Can I point to a chapter verse and say, here's in the Bible where it says anal sex is wrong? No. But what I can do, and I do this with couples all the time, is I tend to look at her and go, are you okay with this? And she goes, and I go, well, then we're done. We're not talking about this anymore. That can go for a lot of things. A lot of couples think oral sex is great. Well, let's look at one of them, one or the other. Are you okay with this? No. Well, then we're done talking about it. Well, let's get the Kama Sutra out and try all these things. Maybe that's not okay. Is bondage okay? Sure, tie each other up. That floats your boat. Playing with fire now. You're starting to turn your sex life into a game and into a drug. Yeah, 50 Shades of Grey. Please don't watch it. It's a mess. Young lady walks in, rich guy, falls in love with him and gets tortured for 3 movies. And we call it love. It's like, it's not love. He's a messed up, sick playboy and she is a person being taken advantage of. Don't care if she even chose it. It's still abusive. But how do we have to be able to start somewhere. Can I point to a chapter and verse that tells me bondage is not okay? I'm not going to point to story after story after story of where it crossed a line and I felt unsafe. No, now I'm treating my relationship like a drug. It's never meant to be a drug. It's a relationship, and it demands relationship, which is really important. And that's where this gets. I teach a class at Corbin called Human Sexuality. I've been teaching it for 15 years, I believe, in Georgia and here. And it's funny how much I still get some of these students who are so conservative that they're just like, I can't believe I'm hearing this stuff. And it's like, my kids attend. I've brought them since they were 3 or 4 or 5. Like, it's like, no, this needs to be talked about. Does a 3-year-old hear the same thing a 15-year-old hears? No, actually they don't. Can you teach certain things a little too early? Yes. But more often than not, we're erring on the side of too late. And so we watch The Voice. I love that TV show. And this twin boy and girl get up on stage to sing, and then they start sharing their story and saying, actually, they're twin girls. One of them has transitioned to a boy. And my 11-year-old sitting next to me watching, and he's like, what? Conversation. Planting a seed. Or the worst one, 2 gay guys get up there and start sharing their love story and their wedding pictures, and then they sing, and it's beautiful voices, and my son's like, that's horrible. It's like, oh, nope, we don't want that either. I don't want you angry at people because they're doing something you disagree with. That's where some of us are at. That's what I was taught. No, we want a heart of compassion that's going to walk alongside, care for, put my arm around, hug. And man, those boundaries are weird too, I know. Some of them need more of your hugs than anything because they don't get that, but that's rough, I know. And so understanding that a lot of the data we have is actually just wrong. Who do you trust with that? That's where I love guys like Mark Yarhouse. He's one of my professors, mentors. I love this man. He's been doing the research forever. Got into it because his PhD professor said, hey, help me. And he started, and he's like, I can't stop. We need to have good biblical conversations. Preston Sprinkle, same thing. Theologian who just got into, we need to have theological depth here. We cannot walk away from Scripture and just do whatever. And so it's all of you are theologians. You're studying, you're deepening who you are. And so I want to help you do that. This today is just kind of that kick for wherever you're at. And I hope my book helps. I hope it's me processing. A lot of it was written on Boy Scout campouts and in a hammock last summer. Or 2 summers ago, as actually some of them watched my boys and Boy Scout events, the way they interacted and how revealing that interaction was of their family life and what they are being taught at home or not being taught at home. What's a healthy, parameter for dating and relationship building? We need to teach that. We don't teach it at 13; it's too late. We teach it at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, so they understand the expectations before they get into the hormone insanity. And we build them up into the men and women that and this is the other hard part, that we hope that they will be. They have free will, which is probably the scariest part of being a parent. Probably the best part of the ministry you're in. They have free will. You're in the picture. They have a chance of getting out of what they're getting at home. This is beautiful, right? This is why free will is beautiful. That's why don't we just you're all Christians, we're done. Well, there's no need for the cross. We have choice, which is scary, because I can also choose to walk away. Part of what I love teaching this and teaching my marriage classes that I teach is it reminds me of my commitment to my wife and how sacred that is. and how potentially vulnerable it is if I get in the way. That it has to be held at a higher standard. What is marriage? Marriage is either two stories, two people coming together that love each other. That's kind of where we're at today. Or two sexually different people that come together that are meant to bring more people into this world. It's the only way that actually people come in this world. There's something about that that's sacred in God's design. As we actually look around the world, and China's in a crisis. They don't have women because of their policies. Was it Sweden you had said? Sweden's on decline because they just stopped having babies. This is something beautiful here about the design of marriage and family, the church family, all those pieces. And so I hope this was encouraging to you and helpful. We'd love to have more conversations beyond even here and one-on-one, so just holler at me. My cards are out there on the table, and then if you bring the ones that you filled out, Kelly can get you a book there. There's other books for sale if you want to get more of them for others. That's they're also on Amazon and everywhere else. But it's been an honor to talk with you today. So thanks for having me.
That's an amazing offer, guys. Thank you for making
Welcome.
that offer
Yes.
to these guys, and thank you so much. My goodness. I would encourage you guys to go out there. He's got a book table out there that'll be available here as we're going to be transitioning into dinner time. But thank you so much. Just really, really appreciate it. Can you guys tell him thank you one more time?